Welcome, JIAN Geyang, Jane Seegert, author of the new book, A Dialogue with Ancestors, 与祖先的对话. Let's just start by telling us about yourself and what inspired you to write this book.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, my name is Jane. Everybody call me Jane. English name is Jane, and Chinese name is 简歌扬, so it sounds similar. This book actually was written with the encouragement of my husband. I have been reading many books in my life. I spend 5 to 6 hours to read every day. So my husband always admired me for this, for me being able to read the ancient books. So he said, how is it possible to catch up? So he said, how about I write him an outline, a simple book. So I was thinking about how to pack the thousands of books, ancient books, into one book. So actually, that was the original idea. So he encouraged me to write this book. I have to say thank you to my husband. And that's why I give some thoughts. So it's a very natural flow. I wrote this book very fast. I wrote in English and Chinese because to hopefully avoid any mistakes. And I also want to leave this book to my children. We have 2 children, one boy, one girl. So I'm thinking about life, about how they should grow up, and later how they should behave as adults and how to live a life. That's why I combine the ancient knowledge of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, basically all the ancient knowledge, philosophy, so into this book and combine with my own life experience. That's the original idea why I wrote this book.
It's interesting that you say you've been a reader all your life and you read for 5 hours a day. That's very impressive for anyone. You mentioned in the book, you talk about your early life in Sichuan before mobile phones and television and the internet. I guess you must be grateful to have to remember life before the economic miracle and all this technology took over. Do you really feel grateful to have had that chance to have become a reader in that way?
Yes, I'm generally a happy person. That chapter I wrote about my childhood actually is to let people know actually there is no differences about how we grow up. So either in the nature or with computer games, it's all matter of how we look at our own life. So we can make the best out of our own life, which can still stay happy and healthy and happy. So that's the main reason. That's why I wrote that chapter. It's not about whether we live in a very modern city full of computer games or mobile phones, or we live in the nature without any computer games. So either way. So that's the only idea I want to brought to write this chapter about my childhood, because there's also a lot of misunderstanding. People think about poor or rich. There's a misunderstanding about that. Also about in China time when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, people in the western part would think China was poor country, but that's not how we grew up. How we think about it. We still find happiness the way we grew up.
Interesting. Well, in chapter 8, you talk about how in today's culture, wealth has become synonymous with success. And do you feel that China is sort of falling into the same trap as the West in placing too much emphasis on material wealth?
This is very funny. You said, it's a West. It's a West thing. I think it's not only a West thing. This has been going on for thousands of years. Otherwise, Lao Tzu and Confucius will not talk about this. This is a human being basic instinct. Human being always chase fame and name. So wealth has been always something putting people's name there. And just nowadays, it's a little bit more extreme. People is named by their wealth, net worth, for example. What is net worth? But in the end, we don't know. We only have this body. Whatever we have outside the body is just temporarily managing it. It's just I'm just talking about nowadays societies, but this doesn't happen only now in the recent 100 years. This has been like this for 1,000 years. Human beings don't really change. Every period of time, we'll have this problem up and down, sometimes a little bit too much, sometimes a little bit better. So generally speaking, that's fundamental human being basics. I have nothing against wealth. It's just about how we look at it, how we feel about it.
So you say you mentioned the similarities between different cultures, and you also say in section 2 of your book, chapter 2, that cultural differences haven't played a big part in your marriage. So is part of the idea behind this book the idea that Eastern and the Eastern ideas are actually just universal ideas, and they're very similar to the philosophies we have around the world?
That's a very interesting question. Yes, a lot of people asking us about this because I'm Chinese, my husband's German. We never have this problem about cultural differences. We don't have this problem. I think people exaggerate about this issue. Actually, I give you an example. If you look at a couple, if they grew up in the same village, you can maybe it's unlikely they can claim to be the most happy couple in the whole world. It's not about how we grew up or where do we come from. We're all human beings. We're living still. We eat 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day. We have to work. We have to sleep. So there's not much differences. People make it as excuse why maybe they don't get along. But because human beings are different, everybody is different. It's just how we find this the common terms. We're only focusing on the basic about how we live. It's very simple. Life can be very simple. Simple life is happy life. People, me and my husband, we come from different countries, so we have actually different background. We have different experience, so we can learn from each other. We take it as a positive way, so make life more interesting. So it's not about where do we come from. I think most of international couples, if it doesn't work out, it's because they make it as excuse. It's not about the culture. It's really about two people cannot get along, maybe.
Simona, you should talk about 3 meals a day, because you have an entire chapter that calls into question the principle of 3 meals a day. Your chapter in the first section on vegetarianism and carnivorism, because a lot of people in Asia are vegetarian for religious and ethical reasons, especially in India, the home of Hinduism and Buddhism. So do you feel there is of course, your health, both physical and mental, is hugely influenced by what you put into your mouth. But do you feel diet is a very important part of spirituality?
It's not necessarily the case. It's in my chapter about this carnivore versus vegetarian. That's why I point out the pros and cons. I'm not saying you have to be a vegetarian or you have to be a carnivore or meat eater. Actually, they both have pros and cons. In the end, it's about less is more. It's about a healthy lifestyle. Eat less. We are sick because we eat too much. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean a vegetarian can be a spiritually higher, a better person than a meat eater. That's not necessarily the case. So you cannot say a deer is nicer than a tiger or a lion. So there's something like that. In the ancient time, the whole village people, they have to eat one cow. So that's not something they are worse than this vegetarian people. Also, vegetarian people, no matter what they eat, actually vegetables, there are bugs, there are living beings on the vegetables too. So nobody can claim to be a saint if they're just a vegetarian. So this whole chapter, what I'm talking about is actually to eat, how to live a healthier life is to eat less, consume less. That's the misconception of the nutritionists these days. They tell you have to eat 20 or 30 kind of different food every day. Actually, our body cannot take it. It's all matter of how much or how we can maintain a healthy lifestyle, a healthy diet. So as adults, actually less is more.
Well, yes. So the reading that inspires most of this book. So the figures that you quote in the book. So Confucius, Lao Tzu, the Buddha, they lived thousands of years ago. So to what extent do the ideas that they share stand up to modern science? Because obviously we know a lot more about. Well, we know that the Earth revolves around the sun. They didn't necessarily know that in those days. So, do you feel most of the ideas in the ancient texts of Eastern philosophy stand up well to modern science?
Yes, this is for sure. Because from far east, from far ancient time, the original ancestors, what our ancestors are talking about, are based on natural science. It's about natural science, as astronomy, as the rule of nature. That's how our ancestors they were teaching us how to live a life. So it's based on life science. So afterwards, and of course, religion were created. So Lao Tzu and Confucius, Buddha, they didn't want to create a religion. He was talking about life science, about the rule of the truth of the universe. Therefore, they were the saint. They were the one teaching about natural science. So these days, scientists, eventually, they have to return back to the original books, to the classicals. What were the saint teaching? Because they did talk about, when it comes to quantum physics, it comes to now these days, they talk about point of singularities. It's all talk about from emptiness to existence, the relationship. Taoism, Buddhism, in the real classical books, in the original books, they do talk about this. So that's how I see eventually scientists will have to go back to this part. I always make a joke about Einstein. If maybe he lived a little bit longer, there will be a breakthrough. Maybe there will be a big differences of human beings' life. He will figure out, if he digs through, he can find out, because there are no proper translations about Buddhist sutra and the Taoist books. A very limited translation in English.
Well, Tao Te Ching has been translated, but it's one of the most translated books on earth, including Ursula K. Le Guin, the science fiction writer, published a translation, and she didn't speak or read a word of Chinese. She just based it off.
That is a very, very good point. Tao Te Ching, I give you a number. Tao Te Ching has been translated with commentaries, even by the Chinese, for over 2,000 years. You know how many copies? Over 700 versions of commentaries of Tao Te Ching, just in Chinese language. Think about that. So Tao Te Ching, you check the English versions. There are so many different versions. The language is something, it's a key of the theory. That's one of the key to open that we call the treasure chest of the theory. Language transforms every 30 years. So think about 2,600 years ago, how Lao Tzu was really talk about Tao Te Ching. I can give you one example why I read I read many commentaries. One of the commentaries in the recent 100 years that was written by one of the famous scholars. Actually, his commentary was even harder than Tao Te Ching itself. It's about the wording. That's what I say always. We have to learn the ancient Chinese language, how Lao Tzu and Confucius, how they talk. They were not using difficult words at that time. When they wrote the books, they were using the common people's language. However, because it has been over 2,600 years, the language is changing. So each word has different meaning. That's a problem. We have to be able to read the original books.
古代汉语一个字是一个词，so 道可道，非常道，名可名，非常名，就是
That's already 3 different meaning. Tao, Dao, He, Dao. That's 3 different Tao already. The meaning is different.
So if you asked 20 different people who spoke different languages, who spoke the
Yes.
2 languages, to translate those words, they would all come up with different translations.
Exactly.
But it's interesting that you say language is always evolving, and probably every 30 years or so, it needs to be freshly translated for new readers. Do you feel like people famously say that when reading a book like Anna Karenina, it's a completely different book to read after you've had experienced falling in love compared to reading it before you've experienced falling in love. And do you feel these ancient texts, like the Analects of Confucius and the Buddhist sutras, do you feel that when you read them at different stages of life, they take on very different meanings?
Yes. In the old times, I'm saying 100 years ago, because the recent 100 years in China, we already were educated in school in a different system, so changed to the new Han, 白话文, we call it. So it's not ancient, but in the ancient time, I'm talking about 100 years ago. So for more than 2,000 years, the Chinese, I'm just talking about the Chinese generations. We learned these books already during teenager time. Analects of Confucius, Tao Te Ching, all this normal, the basic 四书五经. These are already books teenager already finished reading. But nowadays, even university professors could not understand. So you can see, we can claim how far we are developed. But look at this history. These ancient books were already learned by the teenagers in the ancient time. Therefore, I said language is something we have to learn since we're young. So these books were written by the saint, which talk about how we live a life, how we behave as a children, how we respect parents, how we get along with our partners, and how we get along with our friends. So by every age, I learned this since I was a kid, so I read this, I understand this. So even my children, I teach them to read this. So maybe they don't understand certain paragraph, but they remember these words. By every age, when we are 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, 50, 60, every age, actually, this meaning, this theory will play a very important role. The answers were all in these ancient books. So it's like guidance for our life, how we can improve in a difficult situation, or how we know how to behave in a maybe comfortable situation, not to be overly too proud. So just to guide us to stay peaceful. To read the classics books also we have to combine with the history books. So to have a solid understanding, this is very helpful for our life. That's how I look at it.
Really interesting stuff. So it's so you're talking veering towards self-help. Like for example, one of the best-selling self-help books of the past century is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And in it, he uses a lot of ideas from Eastern philosophy, like the idea, he quotes from Confucius. Obviously, translations of Confucius are very unreliable, but he says
Yes.
Don't complain about the snow on your neighbor's rooftop when your own doorstep is not clean, for example. So don't criticize others when there are things about yourself that you should improve on. And in your book, you quote the I Ching, heavenly objects move constantly. So to what extent is your book a self-help book, a way of guiding people toward improving themselves?
The I Ching is we can say I Ching is telling the rule of universe. That's original of Chinese culture. Everything, what Lao Tzu's teaching, Confucius teaching is all part of I Ching. So I Ching, this first 2 hexagrams is heaven and earth. So about heaven and earth, this sentence was written by Confucius. He said a heavenly object always move constantly. So which meaning the stars, the sun and moon, all the objects in the space, they're always moving. So Confucius quoted this, he has a commentary about this part. He said, human being, a good gentleman, should also learn from heaven and earth, because to always have self-improvements. Confucius' main teaching is about to set up our own goals towards Tao. So to have a self-establishment. And then once we're able to help ourselves, then we can help others. So my book, actually the 3 parts, that's how I wrote it logically in this way. The first part is about share and care and health and happiness, how we can be healthy and happy, to be able to practice properly and to eat in a healthy way, how we can be content in our mind. So that's the first part about practice. And second part I wrote is about love start with family. So how then we get along with our family. So that's second part. The third part, I leave it as a cultural heritage. Once we're able to help ourselves and help our family and our beloved ones, and then maybe we can help others, society, or carry on to pass on the culture to the next generations. So this is the Chinese belief that for over 1,000 years, every dynasty, they have this mission. People wanted to pass on the heritage. That's why China is the only country who still has the ancient culture. The civilization, whoever still existed now, is only China now, because the books have been passing on for thousands of years.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable to say, and it's I think you're right that China is the oldest continuous culture, because Greece and Egypt, for example, have very ancient civilizations, but
Yeah.
don't claim to be continuous cultures. Do you feel what one similarity between Chinese and Greece is the words for they have similar understanding of the role of that happiness serves a purpose, but so does sadness. So, for example, the Chinese word for happiness, xiang fu, both of those characters, xiang and fu, also mean luck, and they understand that it's not a fixed state. These things come and go; they ebb and flow, and to try to avoid negative emotions would be like having a battery that doesn't have positive and negative charges. It just doesn't work. So do you feel that these Eastern philosophies have a better understanding of suffering than our modern culture does? I think they understand.
I have a big respect for the Greek philosophy. Yes, I also quoted Plato's theory in my book. Philosophy is anyway in the Greek root is love of wisdom. So wisdom is, we can say in the Buddhist term, it's prana wisdom. Actually, it's about the truth of universe. Actually, so we can say philosophy is something human being chasing about the truth of universe. So when it comes to sufferings, there is different point of view about suffering. Modern people maybe take it as a negative way. Some people take it in the positive way. So about philosophy, I think every philosophy is about to try to help people to be free, to be free from suffering, to search for happiness. This is very natural. Eastern philosophies, of course, because there are so many books, thousands of books have been passed on. So there are so many quotes about this. So Buddhist terms about Four Noble Truths, for example, also Taoism and I Ching, our Chinese culture it's about how we look at things. These days, people look at black and white, maybe. But actually, I Ching's rule, or Taoism is about you look at things, it's like a crystal ball. You look at from 10 different directions. So it can be, something can be good, but there are also pros and cons. Not everything is absolutely 100% positive. Also, there's no such thing 100% negative, because it changes. That's the rule of change. It keeps changing. Buddhism is called impermanent. So it changes all the time. Therefore, suffering is something we need to understand we're suffering. Then we can improve. That's the first step of improving, actually. If people actually they think they are not suffering, they will never improve. They are happy with already the way they are. So the suffering is the root. So that's a Buddhist term. Lotus flower can only blossom, grow from the mud. That's how we look at suffering. So it's all a matter of practice. It's a matter of how we practice our mind.
And the one value that runs through your whole book is that of family values and 孝顺, filial piety. And do you feel that the transition from living now on the other side of the world, it's been seamless? You've been able to hold on to your traditional family values your whole life, despite moving to another country.
I am able to hold this value, yes, and my husband too. That's why I wrote in my book, at least from my experience and also from my husband's family. He's a German family, so they are a very traditional family. They share the same value. We respect the parents, and the children respect us. So for us, we try to keep this tradition. We understand maybe the society has changed, yes, but that's at least we hold on to this value, and that's how we told our children. We're the parents, they're the children. We are different. There is a difference. That's basic. So we said if a human being can't even respect the parents, you cannot expect they expect them to respect anybody. Because let's say parents, let's say look at them as two old friends, right? As I'm a mother. I know this because I raise my children, so change the diapers, how we raise them. So my parents raised me the same way. Just look at them. Even an old man or my parents, the old man, old woman, they have been raising me since I was a kid. They cry when I was sick. So even just accompany me for so many years, to treat them with respect, that's a basic instinct as a human being. That's how we look at it. So this is not about Western people think Eastern people or Chinese people will maybe blindly respect their parents. That's not the case. That's about the morality, the normal value of human being, how to be morally a good person. Because even treat your parents as old friends. They have been doing this for us for so many years. To treat them nicely, this is the basic.
Good. So speaking of the generations and the next generation, what will be your next project? Specifically, do you have any new writing projects coming up?
Yes, actually, yes. I did write. I wrote 7 chapters to explain 史记, 司马迁史记, and there's one chapter his father Sima Tan wrote about the 6 main schools. So I wrote 7 chapters. I would like to maybe publish that. I wrote in Chinese. I have to finish that in English. It's a lot of translation work, just a lot of ancient words in there. So that's one of the project, and I'm teaching about the Eastern knowledge about practice. Also, I have been teaching for 8 months now, so that's already half folder of materials I wrote down. I had some translation about that, so I would like to also to finish one book about basic practice, body and mind. So that's another thing. Of course, there's just now you mentioned about analects of Confucius. That's something in my mind. I would really like to retranslate the whole book.
Would be very enjoyable, but also would be a lot of work.
Yes. So as long as I have the time, so I'm still alive. So
if you can read for 5 hours a day, then I'm sure you can find the time.
you.